Welcome back to Garden Talk, brought to you by the Penn State Erie County Extension Master Gardeners. And again today, I'm your co-host, Mike Bailey. And
Ellen Diplacido is
Ellen.
here again.
Ellen, yes.
Hi.
Calling in from a remote site again. That's wonderful. Hey, last time
Yes.
around, we talked a little bit about raised beds, and we talked a little bit about the construction, but we didn't talk about
Right.
why would somebody want to do that, okay?
Right.
I mean, we talked about our problems with
A
the
little
hard
bit we
soil
did,
and the
but yeah.
in the moisture, but from a gardening perspective, what's nice about raised beds?
Well, what we found out, even though initially they might be more expensive for you, but they are more productive for us, for our purposes at Emmaus Grove, because we can get more plants in one bed than if we try to do everything by a traditional style garden. In other words, Mike, you taught me not to plant in rows, but to plant intensively, and we can do that in raised beds.
Yes, you're right. And what it comes down to is, you look at those directions on the back of a seed pack for, say, lettuce and spinach or beets and carrots. It talks about rows. Okay, when you're working with a raised bed, or even when you're working with the mounded system that we talked about a couple of sessions ago, you can disperse that seed just like you would grass seed, and have it come up in that particular manner.
Right.
And because you're not walking in those beds, okay, you can plant very, very intensively like that.
Right.
And the productivity.
Which also, right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, it's more productive, but also because we plant intensively and we have good soil in there, we don't weed. I mean, occasionally we might have to pull out a weed, but we don't really have to spend our time weeding. We do have to spend maybe a little bit more time watering, but not weeding.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, it really kind of chokes out the weeds. So there's it's a trick. And once you get started with it, you'll really enjoy it. You can, with a couple of raised beds, 3x8 or 4x8, you can raise a lot of produce over the course of a season, can't you? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And you have to be careful about your watering. I mean, it's easier to water, but they do have a tendency to dry out a little quicker. So you have to watch that. You might have to water a little bit more, but it takes less time to water.
I mean, overall, because you're not doing any weeding and you're not doing any tilling for all practical purposes, it's a lot less labor intensive to do raised beds.
Right.
I think anyways. Okay, and
Yep,
with our bigger plants like our tomatoes and peppers, okay, we space them apart, yes, okay, but then we add we add mulch, okay, in the form of straw, grass clippings and leaves, etc. And to keep the weeds down and hold the moisture, and it just is so much nicer to do.
Yes,
now
and they look nice. They look nice.
Yes, they do look
They're
nice.
neater.
Right. Now, some people get raised beds in what we call elevated beds confused.
Elevated.
And an elevated bed is almost like you have a garden bed structured on a table surface, or some kind of a mechanism with legs on it. So it's actually maybe 3-4 feet up off the ground, whereas your raised beds are sitting right on top of the ground. An elevated structure is something that is up above, okay, so that you can garden without bending over. And those are nice for certain people, okay, who don't like to be bending over, or
or if they get older like us.
Just a second, let's not get into this, okay? But what's the important things about some of the important things about these elevated beds, Ellen? Okay, as far as go ahead.
Good soil that drains well, and also construct your elevated beds so that the water can drain and doesn't just sit in puddles in the bed there, right?
Yes, you're right. And the structure has to be strong, because if you put a bed on top of that structure, probably going to need 8 inches of soil on top, and then it gets moist. That's going to have a lot of weight to it. So you got to be careful, okay, what you build it out of, and how you structure the legs, and how you make it so that it's not going to tip over. Because something like that tips over on somebody, they're going to get hurt. So I ask you to be, consider safety in this whole process. You have to. So
and another thing, it's heavy. It's like a raised bed. You can't move it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you want to make sure that you place it when you build it, and before you fill it with your soil and your plants and everything, you have it in a good sunny location.
Right. And if I was going to do an elevated bed, I wouldn't put topsoil in it. I'd probably get some potting soil or that
Potting soil.
potting soil or that premix stuff, which is or pro what they call pro mix.
Pro
Okay,
mix,
okay,
right.
which is very light,
Mhm.
to start with, which really kind of helps. And but
Mhm.
it's wonderful soil for growing vegetables and things like that.
Right.
And
And you can put all kinds of plants in one of those beds, just like a raised bed. You could put flowers, you could put herbs, you can put a few vegetables in, whatever you want. You can mix again because you're not hopefully not planting in rows.
you're right, but I probably would not plan on using a structure like that to plant tomatoes or peppers or something like that. It's
Okay.
probably going to have to be
Okay.
something relatively low growing, uh,
Okay.
because it's something like that is really just not going to tolerate a plant that has that much requirements for a root structure.
Okay.
It's just not going to be very practical.
Yeah.
But
I
you're
have seen them try it. Yeah, at nursing homes where my mom was, they actually did that. I don't know how it worked
yeah,
out, but
yeah.
it's probably like you said, it's probably not a good idea. It's probably those would probably be too
Yeah.
heavy, too big. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And they do dry out, and the soil gets very
Mhm.
warm because it's up in the air itself,
Right.
and
Mhm.
they can tip. That doesn't sound like I'm a real big fan of elevated beds, am I? But I figured I wanted to mention it. With the
Yeah.
idea that I would probably reserve that for garden greens,
Flowers or herbs or
and
greens.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
and some flowers. So
Mhm.
just be careful with those structures. So next
Okay.
time around, we're running out of time already, Ellen. And
Okay.
yeah, I know time goes by so quick.
It does.
We're going to talk about container gardens next time around. I think that's
Okay.
something that we really need to touch on, and that'll hopefully be kind of helpful. So, okay. Well,
All
thank you
right.
for listening. Now,
Okay.
bye
Uh
bye.
huh. Bye bye.